Okay, for this installment of Current Reflections on Tribal College Families, we are joined by John Gritz, a Tribal College alumnus and longtime ally. John Gritz is a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma and currently resides in Golden, Colorado with his wife, Paige Lambert. His entire work career has been with or about higher education. Among other positions, he was the director of the financial aid at Black Hills State University for 18 years. John then worked for 9 years at the American Indian College Fund as a program officer, 2 years at the Institute of American Indian Arts as the director of admissions, recruitment, records, and financial aid, and then 9 years with the United States Department of Education, Federal Student Aid. He has been honored as the National Indian Education Male Elder of the Year, holds an honorary doctorate degree from Sinte Gleska University, Ambacone College, and received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Indian College Fund and the American Indian Higher Education Consortium for his work with the tribal colleges. He is also a graduate of the Institute of American Indian Arts. So thanks, John, for joining us. And we just have some questions we were hoping to ask you. So you've worked with tribal colleges since the 1970s, and you've worked with mainstream institutions as well. What are some of the major differences between the two when it comes to serving and accommodating families?
Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to speak with you, Brad. I'm looking forward to this. I have been looking forward to this. And I'm such a believer, as you know, in the tribal colleges. It took me a while to figure that out, because when I first started working at Black Hills State, I was helping the Native students on campus manage their financial aid money and their higher ed money. And the other part of my job was to help the two tribal colleges in South Dakota then, Oglala Lakota College and Sinte Gleska College, now University. And this is before they became accredited. So I would go down to the campuses. We did all their financial aid, their admissions. We approved curriculum. We approved faculty until they gained their own accreditation. So I would go down to the campuses and I would meet with the people and do my job. And they would do their job. We would make sure students were in compliance and did what they had to do in order to receive the student aid. So that was my first time to be around any TCUs. And what I feel I observed was, well, first of all, I was really nervous because being a Cherokee guy, going down to those two particular reservations was kind of daunting for me because I didn't know anybody. But I quickly learned how friendly both campuses were. Both, you know, when I'd show up and sometimes I wasn't the bearer of good news, but when I would show up, they always welcomed me, you know, with open arms and how you doing and all, just make you feel right at home. And I think that's something you don't get at a mainstream institution. You get the little song and dance that they all do, you know, welcoming, but they have so many students, it's hard for them to focus on one or two. And I could see working at Black Hills again when students from those reservations and other reservations in South Dakota and Montana and Wyoming would come in, they were lost. You know, they had no clue. I shouldn't say no clue. It was a whole different jargon for them to learn about what college life was and understanding what a credit hour is, a full load, and, you know, that they didn't have classes all day. If they didn't have an older brother or sister or mom or dad who went to school, they didn't know some of those things. So we had to take our time to teach them that. But I think at tribal colleges, I know at tribal colleges, they take the time to sit down and talk and make sure the students understand these are the things that in order for you to achieve your degree, in order for you to be successful in college, these are things that you need to do. And I also know that they would encourage the students to ask them. When I reflect on being at Black Hills State, students would come and ask me a question, and I welcome that because I reflected on when I went to college, I didn't know those things. I just went because mom and dad expected us to do that. And when I say us, myself and 4 brothers, and so we all went. But to take the time, and and I had to fumble through it in order to understand what I had to do. And even when I graduated, I still didn't understand everything. But I think at the TCUs, again, they take that time, they take that interest, and they make sure the student understands. And if they're not going to class for some reason, or if they're falling behind for some reason, they reach out to them. They make sure, hey, John, how come you're missing class? What's going on? Are you sick? Is somebody in your family ill? And they understand. The other part of that too, Brad, is they understand the culture from where they are, that particular reservation. And I think that's true no matter where you go in a TCU. They understand where you come from, and they can relate to that, and they help you get through some of that bureaucracy, if you will. And often the school doesn't develop the bureaucracy. The Higher Learning Commission or the accrediting agencies or the U.S. Department of Education, and make them have to do things that just doesn't make sense sometimes. And so they're good about being that buffer and helping the students and reaching out to them. And when they welcome them, it's from their heart. It's not a song and dance. It's from their heart that we want you to succeed. We want you to be here, and we're going to help you.
Yeah. More specifically, what are some of the ways that tribal colleges serve families that you've found particularly effective or noteworthy?
One of the things that gets in the way is FERPA, and the Family Educational Right to Privacy, which is an important law because it buffers between, you're not releasing information about a student because you have to have permission to talk to a parent or a guardian. And I'm not saying they break the law. They understand what that means, the tribal colleges, but they also know how to still comply, but still provide services that are critical and important for the student. You can't release grades to the parents. You can't release transcripts to parents. You can't even talk about their bill to the parents. But I think the TCUs make a very conscious effort to have a mechanism so they can involve the parent if they need to involve the parent. Also at the TCUs, though, as you know, we used to say at the College Fund, the average student is a 30-year-old single parent, single mom with 2 children. That's the average student. So you have another level when you're the sole provider for your family, whether you're married or single, to make it all work, to balance it out. And I think the other thing they do is the classes aren't always in the day, during the day when you go to college. That's when most classes are. They offer a lot of evening classes, and I know when Oglala Lakota, they still do, Oglala Lakota College, they'd go to actual districts and offer the classes. So the student didn't have to leave home. I think that's a key. They don't have to leave home to get their education. And when it's a culturally sensitive environment, then I think the students can react to that.
Yeah. Some have observed that the tribal college movement itself is like a family. In your experience, what do you think they mean by this?
It's a holistic, we always talk about being holistic. And it is a family. I think you know this, man. I have 3 sons that attended a tribal college, Sailors Kootenai College. And it was their choice to go there. When they graduated from high school, I have 5 children. And my son Brian went straight to college, and my daughter KJ went straight to college. But Jeremy, Carlton, and Trevor did not. And that's okay, because they all had their goals and what they wanted to do. But Jeremy and Carlton and Trev, when they graduated, they went out and worked. They worked, they learned life, they learned, just how to take care of themselves. And when they decided to go to college, it was their decision, not ours. And I never forget when Jeremy came home that day, he says, I'm going to college. And his mom and I looked at him and says, oh, that's good. Where are you going to go? Sailors Kootenai College. And I looked at him and I says, why you want to go there? And it wasn't that I wouldn't expect that. Well, I'm saying it wrong. I wasn't making that a demeaning statement question. It was just, what made you select that particular school? He says, I like it up there. And it was a family, because I knew Joe McDonald, I knew many of the staff up there, and we would talk about my sons being there. And it was, like I talked about earlier, it wasn't academic stuff we talked about. It's just, we're really happy they're here. We'll watch out for them. We'll make sure they're doing good, and we'll take care of them. And they did. And my sons, Jeremy and Carlton, Jeremy graduated in 4 years with a 4.0. He didn't mess around. But that's because he was ready to go to school. And Carlton did the same thing. And unfortunately, as you know, our youngest son, Trevor, passed away 8 years ago this May. Well, he was in school at St. Kootenai College. Yeah. And I'll never forget when that happened, when I heard that news that Trev had passed away, the second phone call I got was from Joe McDonald. Wow. And we cried over the phone. He was expressing his condolences, and he was true to his word. He just couldn't say how sorry he felt. And, what can I do to help? What do we need to do? And so, to me, that's the kind of family. Not that you wouldn't get that from a 4-year or a mainstream school. I think you would, but not in that empathetic way that Joe and I talked, where, we could share our grief and we could share our sorrow, and we cried. And when we had his funeral, he was majoring in forestry, and that whole division came from Pablo to Spearfish, South Dakota, to honor Trevor. And it just meant a lot to us. So the family thing, and what my sons told me and shared with me was that they had study groups, they helped each other, they weren't competitive. If somebody was missing, they'd go find them. If somebody needed some help in a certain area, they would reach out to them. And everybody wanted to succeed. And it was like a family in the class. And that whole class was a tight class. I could observe that when they graduated from SKC, how tight they were. They laughed and they joked, and they, and they were happy for each other. And I think they've taken that beyond. I know a couple of those students that I met are still good friends with Jeremy and Carlton now. They're working in Glacier National Park, which is what they wanted to do.
Thanks for sharing that. I know that you're dearly missed in the tribal college movement, John, and there's a tremendous amount of affection for you. So, and so thank you for sharing that. Why do you think tribal colleges?
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Just and I don't want to, but in terms of being the family, when that happened to Trev, I had it. The smoke signals just went out, and I had so many calls and letters and emails from everybody in the tribal college movement expressing their condolences and, what can we do? It just wasn't St. Kootenai College. It was just about every campus. I got something from them and our family, not just me. So I think that again is that whole TCU family thing. And the other part of that, Bradley, is if you ever go to a TCU meeting, and you do all the time, they may not agree on everything, but at the end of the day, they're still friends. And at the heart of every disagreement is not manifest in we're better than you, we're this and that. It's about their students. It's what's best for the school, their particular school, and they compromise in such a good way. And they have knockdown, drag out discussions, but they also, in that same discussion, you'll hear laughter. You'll hear they're joking and teasing each other about it. And I think that just keeps a good balance about what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish and their respective missions. All missions are different. And they keep that to the forefront. And so, they might have an argument, but they'll go have dinner together and they'll talk and laugh. And, that's just part of the business.
Yeah, that's so true. So Why do you think tribal colleges have a different philosophy when it comes to serving families?
I think it's like Jim Shanley said, and you know, it is the culture. The Indian cultures are about families, and I think I so believe that's true, because, and the other thing, I'm going to digress, so bring me back if I get lost on this.
Mhm.
Rick Williams used to say when he was CEO and of the president of the American Indian College Fund, he always would say, Indians learn differently than non-Indians, and it's some of it's visual, some of it's how you're taught. And my son Carlton, he didn't struggle in high school. He had some learning issues, so he was in what we'd call special ed. But when he got to college, again, he was a straight A student. And I said, Carlton, what's the difference between high school and now? There's just such a huge difference in how you're doing things. And he said, when we study at the tribal colleges, we go outside. He said, I go into the forest and they show us things and I can see it and I can touch it and I can smell it. And he said, it makes sense to me when I see it that way. He said, it's not pictures. And they read stuff, but they make it, what's the word I want to use? They make it real to them. And it's like that book. I don't know if you read it, Brad, Braiding Sweetgrass. Have you read that book?
I have not read it, but I am familiar with it. We reviewed it actually.
Oh, it's an incredible read. It's a great read. And that Robin, I can't never say her last name, but the author is, she taught at College Menominee Nation.
Yeah.
Native herself, and is such a good read on how you can mix the botany of what we learn at a mainstream school and the botany how we learn at a TCU. So I think I think every native should read that book. That's pretty bold for me to say, but I learned a lot from that book, and I think it speaks about tribal colleges and how they teach and how our students learn.
Yeah.
So I got up on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. And so that book, Braiding Sweetgrass, I have heard others speak highly of that. So I encourage listeners to this to go check it out. And if you want to get a short review of it, you can also read that on tribalcollegejournal.org, Braiding Sweetgrass.
Oh, no.
So longtime Fort Peck Community College President Jim Shanley, you mentioned him. He stated, Indian cultures are about families. So in Native cultures, how does the concept of the family differ from mainstream society?
That's a good question. And I'm trying to think how I can answer that. When you're at a mainstream school and you come from a mainstream society, it's all about competition. It's all about being number one. It's about, doing the best. And when you're at a TCU, it is about family. It is, and your class is your family. And you're wanting, like I said before, you're wanting everybody to succeed. And you celebrate that when it happens. I think, to me, the greatest of times, if you ever want to really experience a TCU and know what the difference is, just go to a tribal college graduation. You'll instantly see what the difference is. You're not marching in to the ceremonies with pomp and circumstances. You're marching in to a song or a drum, and you're being led with an eagle staff often. And there's just this sacredness about that time and those achievements, and they're recognizing and honoring you because of what you've done. It used to be the biggest moment in a Native student was just graduated from high school, and they were honored in a good way. I mean, I'm not demeaning that at all. That's important. But now all of a sudden it's going to another level of, now we're getting college degrees, and we can honor and recognize that too. I know when I was a commencement speaker at Gwinnett College, I'll never forget that when the graduates walked in, they walked in to a prayer song that a medicine man sang. And then when they did, everything was said and done, and it was time to leave, the medicine man got up and said, "We're going to sing another song for our people to walk out on." And it was, I think, the Blessing Way song. And he said, "I want you to sing it with me." And man, you want to talk about goosebumps to hear that many people singing a song they all knew and those graduates walking out. It just, wow. I mean, that's to me is the culture right there. They were not mixing. They were sharing the culture, teaching the culture, respecting and honoring the culture, and respecting and honoring the graduates in such a enormous way. It's just hard to explain. And you don't get that in mainstream school. They're starting to change a little more. You know, used to you couldn't wear an eagle feather or don your mortarboard with beadwork, but now they're recognizing that and doing that, and I think that's important. And I think the other thing the TCUs will start to see more and more of is, because there's more natives living away from reservations than on reservations, is more and more, I think, of our urban or border town students will start coming to TCUs because they see they identify with that, they know who they are, and I think that just enhances that whole self for them, the part of that family again as well.
Yeah. How can tribal colleges, in your estimation, improve services to families?
I want to say I don't know if they can improve on what they do, because they do such a good job. But you can always do better. Part of it's resources too, I think, and because, you know, as having worked at a TCU for a couple of years, there's a lot to do, and you wear so many hats, and you go to so many meetings. When I was at Black Hill State, you know, I was just focused on financial aid, and I would go to meetings, and that's all my focus was about. But when you're at a TCU, you might be teaching, you might be financial aid, you might be on the retention committee, you might be on this committee and that committee. So they're really spread thin. One of the things that the Department of Education was able to do was introduce this concept, Project Success, and offer some I think some really cutting edge services to their students at no cost to the TCUs, no cost. And when we went and introduced the programs to the schools, and I actually went with my old boss, Dr. Joel Harrell, and we would go to campuses and say, "We have this opportunity for you," and they would look at us like, "No way, that won't work," and said, "But this is going to cost you anything." And that happened 3 years ago. And I got to go to a meeting with Achieving the Dream a couple of months ago in DC, and to hear a couple of presentations the TCUs had done and how they've used that program to make it better. And one of them is holistic student support services. How do we take care of them holistically? And how do we retain them and graduate them holistically? And just to hear how they could use their data. And actually, one of the schools said, we actually started asking the students about how we could better serve them. And they were getting some really positive and some good ideas, feedback from the school. Because one of the students I remember said, "I learned there's a difference between a job and a career." And think about that. That's a reality that, to me, that a difference between a job and a career. So this whole Project Success thing has given them, the schools, the resources so they can better serve their students, provide them opportunities on financial literacy, paid internships, an emergency grant, a new way to teach math, Achieving the Dream. All these things I think they're doing, and it's helping them. Because I know at Nueta Hidatsa Sanish College, they said their retention rate went from, I can't forget the numbers, but like 30% to 70% in 2 years, because they were able to focus on what they needed to do.
Yeah.
And I think anytime you talk about something like that, that it does include the family, because the family is going to school. I remember, oh, Brad, I have so many stories. I even get into them. But I had a young lady come to Black Hills State, and I had my routine. I explained things to them, and I said, you got to ask me questions if you don't understand. And the young lady, she nodded her head, and her mom was with her. Little lady, had a scarf on, sit in a chair, and I conversed with the student, and she was a little older student. And she sat with her mom sat with the purse on her lap. And something happened, and she needed to do something. And she told her mom, I need to do whatever it is. I need to do this. I need to take care of this, or whatever it was. And her mom said, well, go see that man at the school. She said, what man is that? She said, that man that looks like a BIA worker. He's talking about me, because I had to wear a suit and had a bolo tie and all those things. But at least the mom understood that there was somebody at the school that may be able to help her. And when you're in financial aid, you tend to put your fingers in so many other areas. You could look at schedules, you could look at grades, you could look at bills, you could see if they had a hold, you could see if they were in class, all these things. So the mom felt she knew that I would be able to help her. And she did. She came and asked me, and I was able to help her.
That's great. Well, I just have one last question for you. And okay. That is, what advice do you have for young, struggling families who are seeking to improve their lives?
Oh, wow. Be brave, and don't be afraid to ask a question, and especially if you don't understand something. I think so many students fall by the wayside because they think they're supposed to know it. And you don't know everything, because this whole higher education is a different animal. And it's important that you understand things. And to me, it's planning. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do all these things, but you need to know the steps you have to take. And that's where this asking those questions is critical.
Great. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us and for being just such a great ally to the tribal college movement and a supporter of TCJ.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Like I said when we first started, I so believe in what they're doing. They're just, as Rick Williams used to say, they're changing the history of Indian education, and they really are.
Yeah, so true. Well, hey, you take care, and hopefully we'll see you soon at an AHIC meeting.
Sounds good, Brad. Thank you for asking and let me be a part of this, and tell everybody at the Journal I said hello.
I certainly will. Yes, you know, we keep a photograph of you on our refrigerator, so you're always there with us.
Well, my wife and I have to come say hi to you guys in person one of these days.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again.